60 and over? Discover 4 incredible carbs to embrace and the 4 shocking carbs you must avoid. Mabel Collins squinted at the Vibered flyer plastered on the bulletin board at the Maplewood Community Center. The exclamation points seemed to leap off the page, making her pulse quicken. At 62, the looming specter of aging felt darker than ever, especially after the recent health scare that left her rattled, questioning everything. For nearly 40 years, her late husband, Harold, had repeated the mantra, "Respect for your body." This truth hung heavy on her heart, suddenly thrusting her back into an unfamiliar territory of frantic diets and nutritional rules. She had to embrace the incredible and dodge the shocking. But how? Tension simmered within her as she watched the gathering crowd animatedly discussing carbohydrates with an almost religious fervor. Their voices echoed in her mind, conflicting with the deep-seated belief that food should be cherished, not feared. Wouldn't Harold shake his head at the frenzy developing around something so basic? As the seminar wrapped up, Mabel felt a spark of determination ignite inside her. She couldn't just sit by, waiting for life to pass her. She had to dive into the tumultuous waters of nutrition, where everything felt exaggerated and complicated. Determined yet overwhelmed, Mabel turned to the internet for answers. A vast world of advice lay before her, but clarity was elusive. Bold claims flew from every direction, promising transformations with just a few key changes. Whole grains were heralded as enlightening, while other options were demonized. This endless maze of misleading advice made her feel fragile and shaky, emotions she fought hard against. A creeping sense of unease challenged her every step. What if she was just chasing some fool's gold, wasting precious energy trying to control the uncontrollable? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where they're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. Every day, Mabel ventured out, taking walks that shielded her from the emotional storm brewing within. Fellow seniors greeted her with smiles, sharing stories and camaraderie that emboldened her. She clung to these moments, savoring the laughter and warmth. But when Eleanor, a cherished friend, fell gravely ill after neglecting her own health, Mabel felt her world tilt. Mabel's heart raced, tension coiling tighter. Aging wasn't just a slow fade, it carried harsh consequences.
At home, her daughter, Sarah, had begun to voice her concerns about Mabel's fixation on nutrition. "You're losing yourself in this, Mom. It's just food." Each heated exchange echoed in Mabel's mind, a painful tug-of-war between love and frustration. The more Sarah pressed, the more Mabel felt the shadows of fear creeping into the spaces where family loyalty should thrive. How could a simple meal pose such a threat to their bond? Her breath caught in her throat. Mabel wanted to shout, to explain, but the words twisted up inside her. No easy answers to be found. As she cradled the phone, its sudden vibration jolted her. Maybe this call could unravel her tangled web. An anxious breath escaped her lips, bracing for the weight of whatever lay ahead. Would this moment finally help her redefine her health without forcing her family to retreat? Would it deepen or sever the bonds she feared would break? The uncertainty clawed at her, leaving her heart racing as she raised the phone to her ear, ready to step into the unknown. "Mabel?" The voice on the other end was unfamiliar, yet warm and inviting. It belonged to Dr. Evans, a nutritionist recommended by a friend who had successfully navigated her own health issues. Mabel's grip on the phone tightened as a jumble of emotions washed over her. The anticipation of help mingled with the worry of vulnerability. "Hello, doctor," Mabel replied, her voice wavering. "I'm not sure where to start. I just want to feel better." "Let's start with what's been bothering you," Dr. Evans said, calming her racing thoughts. "What is it that you struggle with the most when it comes to your nutrition?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implications. Did she dare admit that her fixation stemmed from fear, from a desire to cope with the vulnerabilities of aging? Taking a deep breath, Mabel took the plunge. "I worry that I might be losing control. I keep hearing all these conflicting things about carbs, what to embrace and what to avoid." "Ah, the infamous carb dilemma," Dr. Evans chuckled softly. "I get it, but remember, it's more about balance than restriction." Mabel's heart began to settle as the conversation unfolded. Dr. Evans guided her gently, suggesting she keep a food diary, not a restrictive one filled with guilt, but rather an exploratory tool to gauge how different foods made her feel physically and emotionally. The idea electrified her spiraling thoughts, a lifeline tethered to a healthier mindset. A surge of hope flickered within Mabel as she contemplated this approach. Was it really possible to forge an understanding with her body rather than wage war with it? Mabel felt a yearning rise in her chest, a desire to reclaim her autonomy, that delicate space between choice and chaos. Days turned into weeks, and Mabel committed to the food diary. She noted the moments of joy she found in sharing meals with friends, the warmth of homemade soups, the comfort of family recipes made with love.
Each entry became an act of self-love, her burgeoning awareness shifting from paranoia over ingredients to celebrating nourishment. The overwhelming maze of misinformation began to clear. Yet, the shadows of doubt still loomed. With each passing moment, Mabel felt a subtle pressure beneath the surface. Sarah's voice echoed in her ears. Was she truly putting herself first, or was this bizarre obsession a distraction? Each time Sarah walked into the room, Mabel felt an invisible wall rising between them, the tension palpable. "Mabel, are we still doing dinner this Saturday?" Sarah asked one evening, her tone edged with concern. Mabel hesitated, unease swirling inside her, remembering to relish the experience of food rather than feed it with anxiety. "Yes, but I think we should cook together this time," she suggested, forcing herself to maintain eye contact. "I would love for us to share and learn together. How about we incorporate some of the healthy carbs I'm learning about?" To her surprise, Sarah's features softened. "That sounds great, Mom," she replied, and Mabel felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps this journey wasn't just about her. Perhaps it could serve as a bridge to reconnect with Sarah. Fueled by a newfound determination, Mabel entered the kitchen that Saturday feeling empowered, armed with her food diary and recipes that celebrated health without restriction. She longed to share this experience, to rediscover the joy of cooking while creating memories that wouldn't just fill their bellies but also their hearts. As they began chopping vegetables together, laughter echoed off the walls, but moments of insecurity peeked through. What if they didn't enjoy the meal? What if her choices left Sarah disappointed? She had pushed so far outside her comfort zone. Was it worth the risk? The pan sizzled, drowning out her rising apprehension. With every whisk and stir, Mabel felt not just the pressure, but the possibility of opening her world. Little did she know, there were lessons ahead, a reckoning that might force her to confront deeper fears hidden beneath the surface of flour and oats. As dinner drew near, Mabel's pulse quickened, anticipation mingling with anxiety. Would this moment finally bring clarity to her evolving understanding of health and her relationship with her daughter? The kitchen was alive with the sounds of sizzling vegetables and the vibrant scents wafting from the stovetop. Mabel's heart raced not just from the aroma of the food, but from a mix of exhilaration and deep-seated fear. This was a vital moment, one that could ground her in her new path or push her back into the shadows of self-doubt. "Okay, Mom, now what?" Sarah asked, her eyes sparkling with curiosity as she stirred a pot of quinoa. Mabel paused, considering what this simple exchange meant. This was not just about cooking. It was an invitation to merge their experiences and create a shared story.
Let's talk about why I picked these ingredients, Mabel began, taking a deep breath to steady her nerves. I think good nutrition can be simple. Quinoa, for instance, is one of those incredible carbs I've learned about, high in protein and fiber. As she spoke, the familiar shame crept in, whispering insidious thoughts about challenging years and the endless dieting. But in that moment, she shook it off. This was a new dialect of empowerment she was learning to speak. In sharing her knowledge, she was educating not only Sarah, but herself too. "Wow, that's cool. I always thought carbs were the enemy," Sarah replied, genuinely intrigued. Mabel reveled in her daughter's enthused reaction. It ignited a flicker of growing confidence inside her. They navigated through the ingredients, discovering the joy in wholesome foods that had been inexplicably marked as adversaries in Mabel's mind. When they moved on to sweet potatoes, Mabel couldn't resist sharing a truth she had barely acknowledged herself. "I used to think these were on the forbidden list, but they're actually a fantastic source of vitamins. You know, the body needs a balance." "Yeah, balance, that's the key," Sarah echoed, and Mabel found comfort in her daughter's enthusiasm for their shared exploration. Yet no sooner had Mabel anchored herself in this newfound connection than an internal alarm blared. Was she really equipped to guide this conversation? What if her understanding faltered mid-sentence? The fear of inadequacy knocked against her resolve, the weight of her past pressing in once more. But then Sarah turned to her, genuine and bright, and Mabel felt something she had long missed: trust. "Can you show me how to roast these properly?" Mabel's hands trembled slightly as she demonstrated,
but a spark of unfolding clarity transformed the kitchen atmosphere. She was teaching, yes, but she was also engaging in a crucial act of self-assertion. The act of cooking, of sharing information, increasingly became a graceful dance between educator and learner, mother and daughter, vulnerability and strength. As the food cooked, their conversation flowed, touching on everything from nutritional misconceptions to personal dreams. It wasn't just about the meal, but a heart-to-heart that chipped away at the barrier that had formed between them. Mabel felt herself softening, revealing dreams she had kept hidden, perhaps even allowing herself to be seen beyond the contours of her identity as mom. Dinner time approached, and with it came a palpable surge of tension. Mabel set the table, and just as Sarah placed the final dish down, the roasted sweet potatoes glistening with a drizzle of olive oil, her heart pounded violently. What if they don't like it? She thought. It was as if the internal voices rejoined, attempting to darken their shared celebration. But then she caught Sarah's gaze, filled with anticipation colored by trust.
Mabel realized the stakes here weren't solely about the meal. It was about connection, trust, and the reclaiming of a shared life. As they sat down to eat, Mabel lifted her glass. Here's to new beginnings, each bite an adventure. The laughter echoed as they toasted, but questions loomed beneath the surface. Could she truly redefine her relationship with food? Could the connection she revitalized with Sarah transcend the meal? Every bite tasted like a step toward resolutions yet to be made, yet the thought still lingered. What if her confidence faltered in the critical moments ahead? It set the stage for a confrontation with herself, one that she could no longer avoid. The evening fell silent for a moment, and in that stillness, Mabel's heart raced again, tethered to uncertainty. Would they navigate the complexities of food and life together, or was this just an appetizer of struggles to come? Mabel savored the sweet potatoes' warmth melding with the excitement swirling in the room, yet behind the laughter lingered an unresolved tension. She focused on her daughter, whose eyes sparkled with delight, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing inside Mabel's mind. She sensed that tonight had painted a picture of hope that was still marred by her insecurities, a canvas half completed, with vibrant colors, but also shadows lurking at the edges. With dinner winding down and the conversation drifting toward lighter topics, a few nervous glances escaped Mabel's eyes. The transformative moment lingered, holding the promise of a renewed relationship with Sarah, but the weight of a myriad of insecurities clung to her like a stubborn fog. Who was she without the constraints imposed by years of dieting, guilt, and turmoil? "Did you hear that the book club is meeting soon?" Sarah asked, oblivious to Mabel's internal debate. "I want to suggest we do that new cookbook together, the one focused on healthy family meals." Mabel's heart fluttered with the prospect, but quickly tightened. Would her past missteps overshadow this budding journey? Could she take the lead in a communal cooking project without spiraling back into behaviors that defined her for so long? The very thought felt like a litmus test, where failure could feel catastrophic. Sure, she stammered, forcing a smile, and mentally rehearsing the permutations of possible outcomes. Would Sarah finally see her as an equal partner in culinary exploration, or would the weight of her struggles pull at the threads of their connection? As she washed the dishes, every splash of water seemed to echo a question: how much of her journey was meant to be shared, and how much was left sacred? Each pouring thought challenged her growth. The notion of sharing her culinary experiences with others loomed just as large as her fear of revealing vulnerabilities. Once the kitchen settled into silence, Mabel felt the familiar tug of doubt.
She rummaged through the cabinets for ingredients, not satisfied with allowing the remnants of dinner to tether them. With neither specifics nor confidence, she plucked ingredients from the shelf, recalling her earlier words about balance. But could she really find the balance for herself in such a public arena? Was she prepared to speak up against the tide of misinformation that still dictated much of the culinary landscape? The decision to contribute to the cookbook forced her to confront her own beliefs about food and nutrition head-on. This could be a chance to share what I've learned, she thought, slowly yielding to the potential of rejection, knowing she could use it as fuel for personal growth. "Sarah," she called, peering into the living room where her daughter was settled with a book. "What if I hosted a cooking session? We could invite a few of your friends too. I think it could be fun." The room's energy shifted with Sarah's surprise. "Mom, really? You want to lead it?" Mabel's pulse quickened. This was a leap, not a step. In that moment, she realized it was more than just a meal that needed preparing. It was a chance to set the stage for reinvention. "Yes, I want to do it. We'll focus on healthy swaps and busting myths about food," she stated, the steadiness of her voice disarming. "Awesome, I can help," Sarah beamed. Praise filled Mabel's heart, but the anxiety only amplified. What if her knowledge fell short? The internal battle entangled her resolve, but somewhere amidst the trepidation, a thread of authenticity began to weave its way into her self-narrative. As Sarah began drafting a list of invitees, Mabel felt adrenaline coursing through her veins. This wasn't only about preparing for the cooking session, it was a critical moment of asserting identity. What if I encouraged people to embrace what's great about food rather than fear it? The thought rattled her to the core. Heck, I could talk about my journey, how I overcame the stigma around carbs, she pondered, excitement mingling with dread. The dichotomy between sharing her vulnerabilities and risking judgment was steep, but wouldn't that encapsulate the essence of true connection, the raw sincerity behind food that nourishes not only the body but also the spirit? As she executed the evening's final cleanup, a newfound exhilaration heightened her awareness. Perhaps this endeavor would not merely alter their kitchen dynamic, it could resonate on scale she hadn't dared visualize before. The prospect of hosting felt like a dawn breaking through the relentless clouds. This journey might redefine how she interacted with others, presenting herself as not just the woman who struggled, but rather someone who had begun to reclaim her narrative. Mabel stood poised at the threshold of her kitchen, the light pouring in through the window, an unguarded moment that felt like the start of everything.
The time had come to face my past and share my truth, she thought, feeling brave enough to step into vulnerability, however uncomfortable it might be. As she turned off the last light, a swirling mix of anticipation and anxiety swirled within her. The echoes of self-doubt still lingered, but they felt increasingly muted. Tomorrow would be pivotal. Would stepping out from behind the shadows of her fears truly herald a new chapter, or would the voices from her past drown out her efforts? In that charged silence, she felt a defiant flicker of hope, an assertion that wouldn't just be for herself, but a lifeline for others too. Mabel awoke to a cascade of sunlight pouring through her kitchen window, brushing away the remnants of last night's anxieties. The warmth of the morning felt almost surreal, challenging her to confront the plans forming in the depths of her mind. Today was the day she would claim her space, stepping beyond the fears that had shadowed her for so long. As she prepared her morning coffee, each deliberate action anchored her resolve deeper within. She felt as if she was sculpting her identity anew, one sip at a time. Yet an undercurrent of unease surged beneath the surface. What if she fumbled? What if her salmon-colored dreams of camaraderie in the kitchen collided with a stark reality? Mabel shook off the creeping tendrils of fear. She turned her attention to her phone, where the list of invitees Sarah had hastily composed sat waiting for her review. Each name murmured a promise of new interactions, new connections. Even the murmurs of doubt she heard from her own internal dialogue seemed smaller now. She took a deep breath, almost tasting the newfound freedom that came with her intentions. Days of preparation had led to this moment, but her self-doubt simmered just beneath. Would the mothers of her daughter's friends view her only as the woman wrapped in the past of her struggles, the one still shackled by insecurities about her relationship with food? Mabel couldn't dwell on others' perceptions. She had to lean into authenticity, her life experiences lending her voice a texture that was uniquely hers. Her thoughts embraced the challenge ahead, but she paused to consider how she could engage her audience in a way that transformed their perception of food. How do I help others appreciate what carbohydrates can offer, she thought. Was there a way to magnify the positivity of her current journey and the complexities behind choosing nourishing foods? As she moved toward the living room, a moment of clarity struck Mabel. This endeavor could lift the veil on the erroneous perceptions surrounding food she had battled against in silence. She had spent years overcoming a debilitating cycle of guilt. Perhaps now was the time to illuminate a path for others. Thoughts swirling, Mabel began to jot down ideas on a notepad.
Each idea sparked a blend of excitement and apprehension. Still, the vision of transforming her kitchen into a haven of culinary discovery took center stage in her mind. She planned to spotlight the simple beauty of cooking together, guiding her guests toward a shared understanding of food that nourishes rather than restricts. The power dynamic would shift. This was less about her wellness journey and more about collective growth. "All right, Mabel," she told herself firmly. "What can you share that feels real? What do you wish someone had told you years ago?" The answer emerged like a beacon. It wasn't merely about healthy swaps. It was about education, empowerment, and finally reclaiming joy around food. As she ventured into the planning stage, she became acutely aware of the emotional stakes. What she chose to share could frame their experience. Would she have the courage to unveil the lessons learned from her personal transformations, the obstacles she'd overcome in the swirling diet culture? With each point she scribbled, she felt a swell of determination.
These ideas began to encompass not just what would be prepared, but stories behind each element, veritable testaments to resilience. She imagined laughter and shared vulnerability echoing in her home, fostering connections that penetrated deeper than mere cooking. Mabel realized that the cooking session was less about the food than it was about the relationships she could forge through authenticity and trust. It was an opportunity to weave a narrative of acceptance, reconstructing her kitchen into a space of unity rather than contention. Suddenly, the doorbell sounded, a sharp reminder that the moment she feared would arrive swiftly. Mabel's heart raced as she approached the door, a mix of nervous excitement churning in her stomach. She took a moment to breathe, centering herself in the present, affirming to herself that she was ready to embrace whatever lay beyond that threshold. As she opened the door, greeted by the first few familiar faces of the day, Mabel understood something profound. Embracing her truth wasn't just about personal transformation, but igniting a spark of change for others as well. Perhaps she would finally consolidate that tangled web of insecurities into a stronger narrative. Or maybe, in sharing her vulnerability, she would open a door to her guests, illuminating the diverse experiences they each carried. Yet, as laughter and greetings filled her home, the singular pressing thought loomed. How would she articulate these experiences when the moment inevitably arrived? With every face smiling back at her in eager anticipation, she felt the weight of her journey surging forward. Would this be a pivotal step toward revelation, or merely another moment lost within the shadows of her fears?
In the air filled with potential, Mabel knew she was standing on the precipice of a significant shift. Nature compelled her into a challenge that would advance her growth, punctuated with a question only she could answer. How deeply could she delve into her own truth, and would it resonate enough to inspire others? As the door swung open wider, Mabel managed a welcoming smile, her nerves quickly melding with the warmth of greeted faces. The first couple of guests entered, each bringing an aura of familiarity mixed with the unknown. Their presence carried with it a multitude of unspoken expectations, and Mabel felt the weight of scrutiny layered beneath their polite conversation. She ushered them into her living room, where the air was heavy with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and the sweet anticipation of the day ahead. The mingling scents began to fill her with a renewed sense of purpose. Step by step, she guided everyone toward the kitchen, her sanctum of creativity. "Soon, this will become a space of transformation," she whispered to herself, though she feared her own words might echo back her doubts. As the guests settled into their chairs, Mabel glanced at the notepad where she'd hastily scribbled her ideas. Would they appreciate her approach? Would they see the vulnerability woven into her desire to share healthful connections with food? The looming anxieties bubbled beneath her calm exterior as they engaged in small talk. One woman, Laura, admired Mabel's decorative cookbook collection. "Do you have a favorite recipe?" she asked, her eyes sparkling with genuine curiosity. Mabel's heart quickened. This was an opportunity, but it felt daunting to pull from her own repository of experiences. The years of battling her relationship with food often weighed heavily, shifting her perception of recipes from inspiration to burden. But it dawned on her, perhaps this was why she was here today. With a mind brimming with determination, Mabel responded hesitantly, "I think I've moved beyond just one favorite. It's more about what each dish represents: restoration, acceptance, and sometimes confrontation." The words surprised even her. She felt a flicker of hope that maybe discussing her journey could unfurl a deeper exchange with others who had faced similar battles. As the kitchen began to fill with laughter and discussion topics shifted from mundane to meaningful, Mabel felt her apprehensions begin to soften. She forgot momentarily about the judgment concealed behind polite eyelashes. Instead, she found herself drawn into sharing anecdotes about her most colorful culinary mishaps and the ways she had navigated the murky waters of dieting norms. The conversation crescendoed as the guests began sharing their culinary memories, each story unveiling layers of their own struggles and victories.
Mabel listened intently, focusing on their nuances, the hesitations that mirrored her own, the moments of shame they'd overcome, and the joy found in chaotic kitchen experiments. Each revelation added weight to the realization that vulnerability is reciprocated when one bravely steps forward.
What struck her, however, was a subtle yet profound change within herself. She was no longer simply the recipient of shared stories. She became a safe harbor for their truths. She felt a flicker of capability igniting her spirit, transforming her insecurities into a bridge to genuine discourse. When the time came to reveal her plans for the culinary tasks ahead, Mabel took a deep breath. They gathered around the kitchen island, and in that moment, she committed to guiding them, not just as a host, but as an educator, sharing her truths with fervor. Today isn't solely about cooking. It's about embracing our relationship with food, rediscovering joy, and letting go of guilt together. Just then, a new voice emerged from the crowd. Janet, known for her outspoken nature, offered a skeptical eyebrow. "Are you sure we're ready to dive into all this? Some of us are still grappling with what healthy really means." Mabel's heart sank, but she quickly recalibrated. This was the direct confrontation she hadn't expected. Janet's challenge held a mirror to Mabel's fears. It was a chance to either retreat into her shell or forge ahead boldly. Determined not to shy away, she focused intently on the group, feeling their collective energy shift, leaning into the unknown together. "That's exactly why we're here today," she replied, her voice steady. "To confront those uncomfortable truths and learn how to redefine our rules around food in a way that feels nourishing." As Mabel saw some guests nod in agreement, she felt her footing stabilize. She had the power to guide this, to facilitate a meaningful exploration of their collective relationship with food, even the complicated dimensions they love to shy away from. But deep down, the echo of Janet's skepticism lingered. Would she successfully navigate each confrontation that came her way? The day had just begun, and already Mabel realized she found herself on a journey she could never have anticipated. The kitchen buzzed with a mix of excitement and lingering doubt, a perfect reflection of Mabel's stormy emotions. As expectations coalesced around the table, she braced for the deeper dialogues ahead. How would she respond to the next challenge? The journey promised to reveal even more about the relationships they all shared, and perhaps herself. The stakes now felt higher, leaving her to wonder, was she truly prepared to embrace not just her vulnerability, but also the complexities of her guests' struggles as well? Mabel felt the tension hang like an opaque veil in the air, blending with the invigorating scent of herbs and spices she had prepped. Janet's skepticism was an unexpected crack in the facade she had carefully built, and it forced Mabel to confront not just this moment, but the shadow of self-doubt that lingered close behind her. "What if they're not ready?" hung in her mind like a refrain. She could feel the weight of each unspoken question from the guests as they waited in anticipation. Breaking the silence, she leaned forward, an earnest invitation in her posture. "I understand that grappling with our understanding of health can be tricky," she continued, meeting Janet's gaze directly. "But isn't that part of the journey? To challenge our beliefs and reshape our perspectives? We're here together, and together we can explore these variables safely." The room appeared to shift as her words sunk in. A few heads nodded, and the buzz of uncertainty began to transform into cautious curiosity. Mabel's heart swelled with a boiling mix of fear and excitement. Each glance of encouragement compelled her to embrace the role of facilitator rather than merely a host. The mere act of standing her ground felt like a redefining moment. "Let's get started," she announced, startling herself with the steadiness of her voice. "I've prepared a few recipes that illustrate how we can enjoy our food without guilt, while learning to love what nourishes us." She motioned toward the dishes laid out on the countertop, each carefully chosen not just for their flavors, but for the lessons inherent in their preparation. Mabel realized she was no longer simply leading a casual gathering. It had transformed, a subtle yet definitive shift, into a workshop of sorts, where growth was at stake. Not just her guests' growth, but her own. As they diced vegetables and stirred fragrant mixtures, she kept the conversation flowing, gradually teasing out more stories that began to stir the pot of collective experience. "Remember when food was just food?" Laura mused. "Now it's so complicated. What's healthy, what's not? I feel like I have to decode every label." Mabel nodded, recognizing that Laura's vulnerability mirrored her own. Her response was instinctive, shaped from months of personal struggle. "That's the crux of it, isn't it? We've layered so many rules on ourselves that sometimes it's hard to hear what our bodies really want."
The guests exchanged looks that conveyed empathy, yet Janet remained guarded, arms crossed as she listened intently. Was she there to challenge Mabel, or to learn alongside the others? Was her skepticism born from personal experience, or simply a barrier to understanding? Mabel sensed that to truly lead this exploration, she would need to push through the discomfort, even if that meant addressing Janet directly. "I can't promise this will be easy," she began, locking eyes with the resistant guest. "But I do promise that it's worth it. Each of us is battling our own beliefs, and by sharing this space and these recipes, we can figure out how to make peace with our choices."
She could feel the room's energy shift slightly, with Janet's expression softening just a fraction. It was an opening, a quiet invitation for all to engage in the risks that lay ahead. But the true test loomed on the horizon. The first recipe required that they confront a foundational belief Mabel herself had struggled to overcome. Next up is a dish that celebrates whole grains, but I know for many, carbs can feel like an enemy. I want us to delve into that mindset today. A palpable silence washed over the group. The tension thickened as Mabel carefully observed every face, searching for signs of readiness or rejection. They were at a precipice. It could tip into productive discourse or spiral into discomfort. As the knives clinked against the cutting boards and food was prepared, Mabel's mind raced ahead. Had she equipped them with the right tools to confront their perceptions, or had she unwittingly opened a box of contradictions that was too heavy to handle? The stakes rose with every whispered uncertainty, and Mabel recognized that she too was on the brink of confronting her limits, not just as a leader, but as a fellow learner in this unpredictable journey. She could feel the churning enhance her resolve, a reminder that authenticity and vulnerability were powerful allies in their shared battle for understanding. The moment of truth drew closer, but before she could exhale, she noticed Janet leaning closer, her expression shifting from skepticism to intrigue. "Okay, show me what you got," she challenged, a spark of determination in her eyes. Mabel took a steadying breath. This was the invitation to reshape not just their meal, but their conceptions of health together. And as the first bit of the recipe unfolded, the quiet anticipation lay heavy in the air. Would they step forward and embrace the complexity of their food relationships, or would the fear of their past choices draw them back into silence? The kitchen buzzed with the clang of utensils and low murmurs, but Mabel sensed an undercurrent. This journey might just unravel mysteries of self-discovery they hadn't anticipated. How would they confront the next challenge, navigating the tricky landscape of their beliefs and newfound culinary curiosities? Mabel felt the momentum swell, ready to guide them deeper. As the tension in the kitchen thickened, Mabel steeled herself for the uncertainty ahead. This was uncharted territory, the moment she hoped would transition her from merely hosting to genuinely leading. She couldn't deny the stirrings of anxiety, yet behind that anxiety was the flicker of a potent drive to forge ahead. "Let's break this down," she said, her voice even as she surveyed the faces around her. "Carbohydrates have gotten a bad rap, mainly due to misinformation. Many of us see them as the enemy. But what if I told you that not all carbs are created equal?" Mabel picked up a ripe avocado, its rich green skin gleaming in the soft kitchen light. This is a healthy fat that can accompany whole grains beautifully. It's not just about cutting out carbs, it's about choosing the right ones. She laid it down on the cutting board, watching as curiosity danced like reflected light in her guest's eyes. Whole grains are our friends. They provide energy, support digestive health, and are packed with nutrients. While I understand the anxiety surrounding carbs, today let's savor embracing them in a new light. She watched Janet, gauging her reactions, wondering if the woman would allow her defenses to drop even slightly. "What about pasta?" Laura piped up, a light of hope flickering in her eyes. "I've always loved pasta, but it feels so wrong now." Mabel felt another wave of resolve wash over her. Pasta can be healthier than you think, especially when prepared with whole grain or legume-based varieties. Just remember, it's about moderation and balance. Mabel moved towards the stove, bringing a pot of water to a gentle boil. The familiar act of cooking began to soothe her nerves, grounding her and serving as a metaphor for the journey they were on together. Life, like food, was best approached one ingredient at a time. "Now, let's roast some vegetables to go along with our grains," she suggested, easing into the rhythm of the workshop. Roasting enhances their flavors and makes them irresistible. As she moved about the kitchen, she could feel her confidence swell.
This was her domain, a space where she expressed her creativity and shared invaluable insights. But just as she turned back to the group, Mabel noticed Janet's expression tightening again. Fear fluttered across her features, and Mabel's heart sank. What now, she wondered. Did her message of acceptance not resonate? Taking a deep breath, Mabel decided to lean into the growing tension. "Janet, is there something specific that's bothering you?" she asked gently, her voice a mix of compassion and curiosity. Janet hesitated, and the silence felt heavy. "It's just that I've spent years trying to suppress my cravings. The idea of embracing these foods scares me. What if it leads me back to old habits?" A murmur of agreement rippled through the room, each person silently voicing their internal struggles. Mabel sensed the depth of Janet's concern. It echoed the struggle she too had faced. "I get it," she replied, embodying warmth. "But think of this as an adventure, not a regression. Let's approach this as a pathway towards self-discovery, not deprivation." The room shifted. Tangible hope mingled with uncertainty. Mabel realized that the change would require not just a physical transformation, but a profound mental shift. She promised herself that she would confront her own lingering fears right alongside them. This journey was not only about carbs, it was about redefining self-worth in the context of food.
As the first dish began to come together, a healthy, colorful grain bowl topped with vibrant veggies and bright avocado, the atmosphere lightened, the scents wafting through the air wrapped around them, inviting curiosity to flourish in places where fear once resided. And just as Mabel caught a glimpse of breakthrough, she felt something shift within herself. She wasn't only leading a demonstration, she was evolving alongside them. This was a pivotal moment, not just for her guests, but for herself, an exploration of the spaces where nourishment and acceptance intertwined. Yet, as they prepared to serve the first dish, a question hung heavily in her mind. How would they receive their creation? Would they savor it or dismiss it, still shackled by past fears? The stakes felt impossibly high, and Mabel knew that the next challenge awaited just beyond the rim of their plates. With everything on the line, she approached the table, ready to serve, wondering if this was but a taste of the larger battle each would face together. Would this meal become an emblem of transformation, or would it crumble under the weight of their ingrained beliefs? Mabel felt the palpable tension settle as she sensed the moment was arriving, one that promised to either bond them closer or risk revealing fractures still yet unaddressed. As Mabel gently set the vibrant grain bowl on the table, her heart raced. She could see the apprehension written across her guests' faces, a reluctant mixture of hope and doubt. For a moment, she considered the dish before them not just a meal, but a catalyst for change. Would they embrace it for the nourishment it offered, or see it as another reminder of what they feared losing? "Let's dig in," she encouraged, her voice more assertive this time, underlying her role as both guide and fellow traveler on this journey. She felt an urge to shift from passive observation to active leadership, to instill in each of them the confidence that food could be a source of joy rather than guilt. Janet hesitated, her fork hovering over the colorful medley. Mabel noticed this and decided to take a bold step. "Let's all try a bite together," she suggested, raising her fork to her plate. "After 3. 1, 2, 3. With that, she took a sizable bite, fully aware that her actions would set the tone for the group. The flavors mingled on her palate, and she savored the textures, deliberately allowing herself to feel the pleasure of the moment. She watched as hesitation slowly eased in Janet's eyes. Then, as if following a domino effect, Laura joined in, and the other guests followed, exchanging glances that silently communicated their cautious commitment. Each bite seemed to dispel a little of the anxiety that had clouded the room. The shared act transformed into a small but significant victory. Mabel felt a swell of pride mixed with excitement. She had not only shared a meal, but had taken the first steps to dismantle the misconceptions around their eating habits. They were not merely reducing and regulating. They were nourished, fulfilled, and most importantly, united in their journey toward acceptance. Yet just as her heart felt light with newfound joy, a shadow flickered across her mind. What if this was merely a momentary defeat of long-standing fears? Would it last? Would the transformations within the kitchen extend to their personal lives, where real change could be excruciatingly difficult to attain? Mabel observed Janet as she nervously pushed food around her plate. "How are you feeling?" Mabel asked, her tone open and inviting. It was a calculated risk,
Yet Mabel felt the need to direct the focus back to Janet, sensing that addressing personal fears was essential for their progress. "I'm not sure. It feels good right now, but what if I slip again?" Janet's voice trembled, tinged with anxiety. Mabel recognized in her apprehension the very essence of the journey they were on, the struggle between their past and the possibility of a more nurturing present. "Every moment is a choice, Janet. It's not about being perfect, but being compassionate with yourself. Allow today to be a fresh start." Mabel's heart raced as she realized the weight of her own words. This wasn't merely about offering advice. It was about embodying that very compassion. The conversation drifted, opening pathways of shared vulnerability. Other guests began to share their stories, their struggles ebbing away as they engaged in a collective moment of inquiry and acceptance. Mabel felt the connection strengthen within her kitchen, transforming it into a sanctuary, a place where fears could be laid bare and courage could take root. But with this budding intimacy came a new realization. This workshop was also a mirror reflecting her own unresolved inner conflicts. As much as she guided others, she too had to confront her deep-seated fears about food, control, and self-worth. The moment shifted. She felt her unaccused vulnerabilities clawing at her with increasing urgency. While the group laughed and grew animated, Mabel fought the instinct to retreat into her shell of perfectionism. Instead, she straightened her posture, deciding she had to share more of herself. "I've had my battles with food. It hasn't been easy for me, and I still work on it every day." Her honesty surprised even her. The room fell silent as they processed her admission. Would this shift change their dynamic? Would they be able to trust her more deeply, knowing she stood as both instructor and fellow traveler? As she forged this connection, Mabel felt a powerful surge of determination. The more they shared vulnerabilities, the less alone they all felt. Yet, as she and her guests moved into deeper conversations, a lingering question stirred within her. Would real change materialize from this shared understanding, or was it merely an illusion built upon fleeting camaraderie?
With the lights of the kitchen casting a warm glow over their engagement, she understood this moment was just the beginning. The weight of unspoken truths hovered, waiting for resolution. The challenge ahead loomed. Could she confront her own fears to emerge stronger, and could their collective vulnerability transform into sustainable growth? The stakes had risen, and Mabel found herself more invested than ever. She inhaled deeply, wondering, was she ready to face not just their vulnerabilities, but her own head-on? As aspirations for a healthier future clashed with her internal battles, one thing became clear. This journey would demand more than just culinary skills. It would require emotional labor, resilience, and relentless honesty. The evening promised both discovery and confrontation. Her story and their stories would ultimately intertwine, leading them toward uncharted layers of nourishment and acceptance. Would they all have the courage to continue digging? As the evening wore on, Mabel felt herself transformed. Each shared story, each collection of laughter, brought her closer to a sense of resolution she once thought impossible. They had pushed past the boundaries of simple cooking, tackling the difficult questions surrounding food, health, and self-worth. But the reckoning didn't stop there. It extended beyond the kitchen, beckoning Mabel to confront the intricate tapestry of her own insecurities. With every bite of the colorful grain bowl they had prepared, a wave of understanding washed over the group. But for Mabel, the real challenge loomed as she leaned into the understanding that her journey was a continuous loop, intertwined with both triumphs and setbacks. "How do I embrace this ongoing process?" she pondered as she watched Janet quietly nibble on her dish, her own hesitation reminding Mabel of her many battles with self-acceptance. Food isn't just about physical nourishment, it also involves mental and emotional aspects, Mabel said, calling upon the courage she had nurtured throughout the evening. "I want us to discover how to create healthy relationships with food, rather than merely subscribing to diet fads. My journey has been riddled with many wrong turns, but I've found strength in learning from those experiences." At that moment, something shifted. Mabel could see the light of recognition in the eyes of her guests. They mirrored her own realization of the power that honesty could forge. Janet's initial skepticism began to dissolve as she spoke up. "You mean it's okay to have those struggles? That it's part of the journey?" "Absolutely," Mabel affirmed with renewed conviction. "Owning our narratives allows us to break free from the shackles of guilt and fear. We learn to embrace our imperfections as part of who we are, shaping how we relate to food and to ourselves." The words flowed like water, easing a mental burden she had carried for far too long. As they sat together, a tapestry of shared experiences emerged. The chatter became not only about healthy recipes, but also about revealing personal histories, fears, triumphs, moments of doubt, and moments of joy.
Mabel realized that every insecurity and struggle shared was a step toward reconciling her own. As much as she aimed to educate her coworkers, their communal exploration of food and health was crafting a narrative of resilience, of embracing vulnerability in a world obsessed with perfection. Together, they discussed ways to incorporate mindful eating into their daily routines. Strategy emerged in the form of concrete action plans, and Mabel took notes as her guests shared their own anecdotes of overcoming food addiction, binge eating, and guilt-centric eating habits. It became clear they were rewriting their definitions of wellness together. Yet, amidst this unfolding narrative, Mabel felt the remnants of doubt lingering silently in the background. Could she uphold this newfound commitment to health without slipping back into old habits? Was she truly ready to advocate for healthy relationships with food, or was she merely staving off confrontation with her own past? The journey ahead was about more than just changing meals. It entailed reclaiming her identity. Mabel stood at the crossroads of resolution and uncertainty, staving off the weight of her apprehensions. She decided then that vulnerability was just as valuable as information. Through the act of sharing her own struggles, she could build an unwavering support system, not only for her guests, but for herself. As they concluded the evening, Janat looked towards Mabel, a newfound determination in her gaze. "Thank you for sharing this space. I see now it's about balance, and that even in our struggles, we're all deserving of joy and of good food." Mabel beamed, warmth pulsing beneath the camaraderie they'd forged. Each guest began to rise from the table, laughter still echoing, but she knew the work was only just beginning. Affirming her own resilience felt monumental. Today had transformed her from a reluctant participant into an empathetic guide. Later that evening, as Mabel cleaned up, she reflected on how far she had come. She had stepped into her power, navigating the complexities of her relationship with food. Her heart swelled with gratitude. She had not only confronted her own patterns, but had empowered others to do the same. The doorbell rang once more, and as Mabel turned to answer, she realized that her world was poised to change in a profound way. These moments were no longer in isolation. They were multipliers of connection and healing. The very first step of courage was the decision to engage fully in her narrative, which would facilitate the growth around her. Mabel stepped outside into the night air, her heart steady and purpose clear. She was not simply a survivor of her struggles. She became an advocate for progress.
Through embracing vulnerability, she would advocate not just for herself, but for a larger community of individuals navigating similar challenges. Tomorrow, she would begin drafting a concept for a community cooking class focused on mindful eating, an initiative born from not just struggles, but the unity formed over a shared table. And in that quiet assurance, she understood. She was ready to embrace her future, whatever it held. This was her moment of independence and validation, defined not by perfection, but by perseverance. Now, let's take action. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.